Hey guys, Sean from Bantam Overland. Today we are super excited to bring you our brand new exclusive Bantam Overland 8-speaker Sony plug-and-play bundle. This Sony plug-and-play bundle will go perfectly with our Bantam Overland Sony head unit plug-and-play bundles, such as the Sony 4000, 6000, or 9000, as well as our 85 and 9500 bundles. So our brand new bundle will consist of 8 speakers, 4 mid-bass drivers, and 4 tweeters, as well as all of the components necessary to make it a plug-and-play bundle. You'll also get our Bantam Overland 3D printed tweeter cup mounts for both the dash as well as the soundbar. Now our 3D printed tweeter mounts are dual cut, so you cannot make a mistake putting them in. They'll fit on either side. As far as the rest of the accessories that come with our Sony GS plug-and-play bundle, you'll have our Bantam Overland 6.5-inch speaker adapters and some screws. We'll be installing everything into the factory locations for that clean and OEM look. Our brand new bundle will give you that clean, crisp sound that you're looking for in your 2015 to 2018.5 Jeep JK, as well as give you better frequency and sound response. So now that we've gone over our brand new bundle, let's go ahead and go over the tools necessary to do the job. We need a screw gun, impact gun, a Phillips head screwdriver, a pair of cutters, a panel tool. You can use metal or plastic. I prefer metal. A socket wrench, a socket extension, a 10mm, and a 7mm socket. You'll also need some sort of light so you can see, especially up under the dash. And you'll also need some wire ties to clean up any extra wiring that you may have. So now that we've gone over all of the tools necessary to complete our installation, let's go to our Jeep, get it all disassembled, bring it back to our table, and I'll show you how to remove and then install our Sony GS plug-and-play bundle. Let's begin with the speaker disassembly on our Jeep Wrangler. Now I like to start on the driver's side, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the dash speaker and then move to the lower knee panel speaker and then go over to the passenger side. First step of starting the disassembly, we're going to actually unplug the door and release it from the catch just so we have enough room to work in the side panels here. So what you're going to want to do is unhook the hold out of the hook and then reach up under and unplug the electronics for the driver's door. So unplug and unhook. Then you're going to use some sort of soft cloth or towel to protect the metal of the hood area from the door pushing or denting it. Just lay that in there gently, and then we can start with the removal of the top dash speaker. So for that, we'll need a panel removal tool, panel popper. Just gently place that underneath one of the edges and remove the speaker grill. Set that aside so it doesn't get damaged. And then we're going to use a 7mm or 9/32 socket to remove the 2 bolts that are holding down the top dash speaker. Now be careful with the front glass. You don't want to have your ratchet hit the glass, otherwise it could potentially crack it. Bolt 1 is out. We'll take that, put that with the speaker grill, and then go ahead and remove the bolt closest to the windshield. Again, being very careful and not to hit the windshield. You can always use your finger as a little bit of a buffer, just to be careful. Now remove the second bolt. Put that with the grill. Then you can just pick up the speaker and you're going to want to press on the tab on the speaker to remove the connector. So now we've finished taking our driver's side top dash speaker out. It's time to move over to the lower part of the dash, or your knee panel. So for that, we're going to take out 2 panels and 8 fasteners holding both the dash and the pod in to the dash. So panel popper, gently get in there and pop and remove. Underneath the steering column, there's 2 pops. Pull down and just release. We've removed our 2 panels. Now we have 8 total fasteners to remove. There'll be 2 on the end. They're going to be brass or copper in color. We'll have 2 on the inside of the lower dash panel, 1 in the bottom left-hand corner, and then we'll have 2 10mm bolts holding in the protection plate, and then 1 10mm bolt in the very bottom, and we'll get you a close-up on that one of how to get that one out. So let's go ahead and start removing some of the bolts. We'll start with the lower dash panel, removing those 2 7mm bolts. And then we'll remove the 2 brass colored bolts from the side of the speaker pod. There's the second one of those. Now for the one in the lower bottom left-hand corner, you're probably going to need to use your socket. Got that removed. Now you'll notice we can pull this slightly away. So we're going to switch over and go to our 10mm socket. Remove the 2 big bolts directly underneath the steering column. Lift the panel up and out. And then now it's time to remove the last bolt holding in the speaker pod. So we'll go ahead and remove that. That is directly up under. You can see it when you look through the dash and where its approximate location is. Right on the very bottom of the speaker pod along the metal brace for the dash. So it's right there. So we'll take our 10mm, get it on there, and remove that bolt. You'll notice that the speaker pod became very loose. Next step in the removal process is unplugging the factory or OEM connector out of the speaker pod. Best way to do that is to either reach in underneath the steering wheel or reach in from the bottom and press the small clip that is facing the firewall and remove from the speaker pod itself. Once that is removed, you'll be able to pull back on your front dash plastic and rotate your speaker pod out of the dash. Make sure you set your speaker pod somewhere safe. Now that that's done, you can go ahead and move to the passenger side of the dash and repeat that process. Now we've moved over to the passenger side. This will be very similar disassembly as the driver's side was. So we're going to start out by removing the electronics harness and the retention harness for the passenger door first. So let's go ahead and do that now. Unplugging the connector, just push in, pull out, and remove the hook. Making sure that we have some sort of protection between the door and the hood area. So now that that's all done, we can go ahead and start on our passenger top dash speaker. The passenger side dash speaker is exactly like the driver's side. So we're going to take our panel popping tool, remove the speaker cover, and then remove the 2 7mm bolts that are holding that speaker in. Again, you want to be careful with the windshield and not tap it with the ratchet. Bolt number number 1 is out. Go ahead and place that in the factory speaker grill. Begin on bolt number 2, using your finger as a buffer to the windshield. Remove that second bolt. Now we can lift up our speaker and press in the little pin and remove the factory harness. Now that the passenger side top dash speaker is done, we can go ahead and go to the passenger side knee panel speaker. We're going to begin by removing the side panel. Again, panel tool, just pop out and slide out of your way. Next, we will remove the glove box. Release the glove box, let it come down, push in on the side panels and remove. Next, we will disconnect the OEM speaker connector from the pod, reaching into the glove box, depressing the button on the front side of that or towards the firewall, and removing. We'll then have 2 7mm bolts to remove from the front panel, the same 2 7mm bolts on the side panel holding the speaker pod in, as well as the single 10mm holding the bottom of the speaker pod in. So let's go ahead and get those removed now. Then on the side of the speaker pod, then we have one more here. So now the final 7mm bolt in the lower right hand side of the dash. Now that that's out, we can release the dashboard and finally remove the 10mm bolt that is holding the speaker pod to the sub dash. It's right there. Move the bolt all the way. You can put the dash panel in, and then you're going to remove the actual speaker pod through the glove box and out of the vehicle. Moving to the rear of the vehicle and removing your soundbar is a pretty simple process. You may need 2 people to do that, but I'm going to show you how to do it with 1. So on a soft top, you're going to have 3 10mm bolts holding in each side of the soundbar. On a hard top, you're going to have the same 3 bolts, but you'll also have 2 bolts that will hold your Freedom top in. Now let's begin taking out the bolts. Now that the 3 bolts are out, the passenger side will have the factory plug on it. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to put 1 bolt in a turn or 2 to keep it up, move on to the driver's side, remove those bolts, and then come back and remove this bolt and unplug it and remove it from the vehicle. Moving to the driver's side, we're going to remove the same 3 bolts as we did on the passenger side. Once the final bolt is out, you want to make sure you have a good grip on the soundbar on the driver's side. Slowly let that down, just so it doesn't slam down or hit you. And then we can move to the passenger side, remove that final bolt, and unplug the OEM speaker plug, and then remove it from the vehicle. So now with our soundbar resting on the back seat, we can remove our final bolt and unplug it. So holding onto your soundbar, remove that final bolt out, and there'll be a plug here. Press in and remove it, and then you can remove the entire soundbar out of the Jeep. Now that disassembly is done, we have everything on the table that we need. I'm going to start with the soundbar. So for this part of the installation, you're going to need a T20 Torx to remove the 3 bolts holding in not only the speaker grill, but also to remove the factory speakers as well. So let's begin by removing the grill and the speakers out of each side, and then we'll go ahead and get into the installation of the new speaker kit. So I have my T20 on my screw gun already. Set the screws inside there. So now the 6.5-inch speaker will have 3 bolts holding it, and the tweeter will have 2 holding it. So 5 total there. So we'll go ahead and remove those. Put those in a safe place. So once you remove the 6.5, just push in on the retaining clip and remove. Tweeter, same thing, just a little bit smaller. Gonna have to use a fingernail, just push in and remove. So let's go over to the other side, get this all out, and then we can start putting in our new kit. Speaker grill off, remove the 5 bolts holding the speakers in. And again, just push, remove, and the tweeter, push it on the tiny tab there and remove. We'll get these out of the way. So now we're ready to go ahead and install the plug-and-play portion of the kit. So you'll have 4 different plugs for each part of the system. So you'll have 2 for the mid-bass drivers and 2 for the tweeters. Now the tweeters will come already pre-assembled with the crossover in line for the tweeters. So let's start by using our Bantam Overland 6.5-inch adapters. You'll notice that there is one longer, so that will go towards the top. Get those dropped in there. And we'll go ahead and use the factory bolts to hold the adapter down. So you'll grab 3 of those, start those by hand. And we'll just snug those down. You don't want to go crazy on them. Then we'll move over to the other side. Get these 3 screws in. And get those snugged down. Both of our speaker adapters in. We're going to move over to the tweeters so we can keep our T20 on our screw gun. So very, very simple. You will have a male and female spade on the plug-in side. So we can plug our tweeter in. Just plug it in. You'll hear that click. Grab one of your tweeters and you'll find the corresponding male and female on there. So we'll plug in that male to that female, making sure that plastic is covering any of the metal so they don't ground out inside. Plug in the other one, and then we'll just tuck away our crossover and go ahead and mount the tweeter, starting it by hand again. Again, you'll be using all your factory hardware on this portion. So I can go ahead and snug that down. So now that's in. We'll move over to the other tweeter. Again, just plugging in, hearing that click, and then matching up the male and female spades on the other side. Once those are plugged in, can hide the crossover down in. And then use 2 more of your factory bolts. And then snug those down. So now that the tweeters are complete, we can go ahead and move over to our mid-bass drivers. Now the kit will come with a bag of screws for both the soundbar as well as the knee panel speakers. So we'll give you 9, you'll only need 8, but we give you that extra one in case you drop it. So for this portion, you're gonna grab the single plug and play harness, get that plugged in, hearing that click, grab your 6.5-inch driver. Now there'll be a larger spade that'll go on the positive side, and then a smaller spade that will go on the negative side. Get those plugged in. Go ahead and drop your speaker in. Now you're going to want to line up the pre-drilled holes with the cutouts in the Sony speaker. So once you have that all lined up, go ahead and grab 4 of your Phillips head screws, as well as your Phillips head tip. Now, once again, be gentle, and I prefer not to go all the way in at first. Snug them up by hand or with the screw gun. You want to be able to have a little bit of movement just in case. So now that they're pretty much all in, we'll grab our Phillips head and go ahead and just tighten them down. There we go, perfect. So now we can move over to the other side, get this one all done, grab our 4 screws, our plug, dropping it in, lining it up with the pre-drilled holes. And again, just be careful when you're screwing them in. And then we'll just finish tightening them up by hand. There we go. So now our brand new Sony plug and play bundle is in our soundbar. We can go ahead and just put our speaker grill covers back on, and then we can move on to the knee panel speakers and getting the 6.5s in there. So. Don't need to tighten them super tight. Just get them snugged up in there. Now that last screw is in there, we're all done with the sound bar. We'll get this out of the way, get the 6.5s up here, and get those 6.5-inch Sonys installed. So now, moving on to our knee panel speakers, the 6.5s. It'll be a little bit different removing these. These are actually Phillips head screws that are holding these in from the factory. So we'll remove the 3 out of each, get the speaker unplugged, and then start the install of the new speakers. Just like in the soundbar, same plug, just a different color. Just push in and remove. Again, push in and remove. Now on the front speakers, we don't really have to do anything with the tweeters until we're back inside the Jeep. so we won't worry about those for now. As far as the knee panels, go ahead, grab our Bantam Overland 6.5-inch speaker adapters, get them placed. The larger tab will go on the top of the unit. Now they're in there, we can go ahead and just get the factory speaker screws back in. Again, just snugging up. Same on the other. So now comes the assembly of the 6.5. So same as the sound bar. Grab your adapter, get that plugged in, hear that snap. Grab one of the 6.5s. Bigger tab, again, is positive. Slide that on. Smaller tab is the ground side of the speaker. Make sure you get a little pull in there, make sure they're not going to fall off. Drop them into the speaker pod. Again, lining up the factory mounts with the pre-drilled holes in the adapter. And then you can grab your other bag of 9 screws. Grab 4 of those. Get them all started, and we'll again tighten those up by hand. So now they're all pretty much in. Go ahead and tighten them down. We can move on to the other side, the other mid-bass driver, the adapter, getting that plugged in. Making sure they're lined up. And go ahead and screw it in just like the last one. Finish tightening that one up by hand. Now we're all done with getting our mid-bass drivers into the factory knee panel pods. So now we can go in and begin our reinstallation of our brand new speaker bundle. We're going to start on the driver side, and we're going to start with the tweeter. So just like the installation of the tweeters in the soundbar, you're going to grab your 3D printed mount with the tweeter already installed and match up your male and female spades, get them plugged in, making sure that plastic's covering it. Take your plug and play harness, plug it directly in. So now that we're all plugged in, we can go ahead and stick any excess inside the dash. Because our 3D printed adapters are cut for both sides, you just have to line up one of the notches with the factory holder and get them dropped in. And you're going to grab your 2 7mm screws and get that started by hand. Go ahead and grab your socket wrench and 7mm socket and tighten that down. Now again, be careful of the windshield. You don't want to bash the windshield with the end of the socket. Now once that's all tightened down, give it one little push. You can go ahead and put your tweeter grill back on, and we can move on to the knee panel speaker and get that all installed. We have everything together. Just as the disassembly, gently pull out on the dash. Slide your speaker pod in. Get that in. Now I like to start with putting the brass bolts in first. So you just want to get it lined up there. Get these 2 brass bolts in the side started by hand. You can go ahead and take your screw gun or your socket, just give it a little bit of a turn just to get them started and in. Next, we'll move to the 10mm bolt that holds the bottom of the speaker pod in. Again, pulling out on your dash piece and going up in on the bottom. Getting that started by hand. Once you get that bolt started, you can go ahead and use your screw gun or your socket to get that tightened up. Once that's tightened up, go back to your brass colored bolts and go ahead and get them tightened up. Just double check your speaker pod, make sure it doesn't move, tilt, or it's at a weird angle. So once that's in, again, you're going to want to reach through underneath your steering column and plug in your speaker harness. If you don't plug that in, you will not have any sound. So get that all plugged in. So now that we've remembered to plug in our speaker pod, we can go ahead and put together the rest of the driver's side of the dash because we're done. So let's go ahead and get the 3 7mm bolts back in. So 1 below, 2 in the front, as well as the 2 10mm bolts underneath the steering column. So let's get that done now. 7mm below. Then 7mm there. Then we can go ahead and switch out our 7 for the 10. Get our protector plate hung back on. Start our 2 10mm in there. Get those. So everything's tight, our dash is tight, all our bolts are back in. And then go ahead to put our lower trim panel back on. Just tilt in, push in, and then we can go ahead and put on our side trim panel. So now driver's side of the dash is done. Just remember, if you did open up your door all the way and unplug, make sure you close that up, rehook that, and replug that in. Now that we've completed the driver's side, we can move over to the passenger side. Same process. We'll grab our tweeter pod and our crossover with the plug and play connector already on it. Match up the male and female spade connectors, get those plugged in, making sure that the rubber covers are over completely. Everything's together. Now we can go ahead and mount it in the dash. And just as a reminder, our 3D printed tweeter housing has the notches for the factory pin on both sides, so it doesn't matter which side you use it on. So with that in mind, we can go ahead and mount our tweeter, plugging in our plug and play harness, making sure we hear that click, give a little pull on it, make sure it stays, and then you can go ahead and put everything into the dash, lining up that notch with the factory pin, just like that. And then go ahead and secure it down with the 2 factory 7mm screws. So we're going to start it by hand as usual, and then go ahead and tighten it down with a 7mm socket. Now that that's all tightened down, we can grab our factory tweeter cover, pop that on, and it looks OEM. So now it's time to go ahead and install our factory speaker pod. So just as you removed it, you're going to go through the glove box. So just slightly tilt in to get it in, and then reach through to pull it over, lining up the screws the brass colored screws here. So we're going to go ahead and just get those started a little bit. Get those in. Both sets. Get them slightly screwed in. Get our 10mm screw or bolt in the bottom of the speaker pod. So we're pull this out, get that in there, and then go ahead and get it tightened up. Go back to these brass screws and just finish tightening those up. Double check that our speaker pod is tight. So, and before we forget, go ahead and plug in our speaker pod just by reaching through the glove box and plugging it in. So that's in. So now that the factory speaker pod is secured and plugged in, we can go ahead and put in our remaining bolts. So the 2 in the front, 1 on the bottom. And the last one on the bottom. I usually like starting that one by hand as well. Getting that screwed in. Now we're nice and tight. Everything is screwed in. You can go ahead and grab your glove box and then just line up the 2 hooks with the matching on the dash, squeeze in and close. So last thing we have to do is put on our side panel, and then also remember to reinstall our catch and our electronics for our door. So just remember, when you hook that up, you're going to want to hook your door first, and then go ahead and plug in the electronics. So go ahead and grab our side panel, get that installed. So now that we've completed the installation on the front part of our Jeep, it's time to move to the reinstallation of the soundbar. Again, you don't have to remove the soundbar to do the installation. It's just a little bit easier. So again, I'm one person, so I'm going to show you how to reinstall the soundbar with one person. It's much, much easier if you have somebody to help you, but I don't. So we're going to do it by ourselves. So first step, get your soundbar in the back of the vehicle, lift it up, and plug in the factory speaker harness. So now that the factory speaker harness is plugged in, we're actually going to go to the other side and get it lifted up and get a couple of the bolts started. Then come back over, get these bolts started, and then tighten everything down. So be over there, get those started. Grabbing our 10mm. So we're going to go ahead, get our soundbar into place, grabbing one of our bolts, get it started. So now we have our soundbar hanging, and go ahead and get the other one started. Then we can go ahead and get them cinched up a little bit. Now we can get our third one. And get that one started. So now our soundbar is basically fully in place. We can go back over to the passenger side, get those 3 bolts started and tightened up. So now back on the passenger side, we'll get our bolts started by hand. Go ahead and snug those all the way up. And we'll get this one in. And we can go ahead and snug that one up. And then go back over to the driver's side, snug those 3 up, and you're done with the soundbar. Now that our installation is all complete, it's time to take a listen and see what we think. So in our Jeep JK, we have the Sony 9000 ES bundle. Definitely a significant increase in the highs over factory, as well as a much tighter mid-bass coming out of those speakers. This Sony GS bundle sounds absolutely amazing in our JK. So if you would like to check out any of our other amazing head unit or speaker bundles, please visit us at bantamoverland.com. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, have a blast out there.